Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Prose podcast. I'm your host, Tally Shamus, and today I'm joined by Karis Rogerson to talk the art and craft of writing and whether you need an MFA to succeed. Karis Rogerson is a writer, reader, and podcaster who was born in the South Carolina Midlands, raised in northeastern Italy, schooled in the German Black Forest and Kentucky Bluegrass, and now lives in Brooklyn on Lenni Lenape land. She has an MFA in writing for children and young adults from VCFA, and her fiction is represented by Eric Smith at Neighborhood Literary. Karis writes sapphic romance for all ages, as well as poetry, personal essays, and select journalism. She's a co-host of the podcast The Right Way of Life, and you can find more at www.karisrogerson.com or follow her on Instagram at Karis S. Elizabeth. So Karis, do you want to tell me a little bit about your writing journey?
Yeah, of course. I have always had a big love for stories. I remember, being a kid and we'd be sitting around for family dinner and I'd be like, tell me a story. And my parents were like, oh my God, we did this 5 times yesterday. We have no more stories. So eventually I learned to read and then I was like, perfect. I can just go straight to the source, get my stories directly. When I was around 12 in middle school, I was reading this series and I Googled the author and was like, oh my God, she wrote her first book when she was 11. And of course, immediately, my first thought after that was well, I'm behind. I'm not going to be the youngest author ever. That's so rude, but I've got to keep trying. And somehow I'm 32 and I still haven't published a book. So, you win some, you lose some. But I did an undergrad degree I got a BA in creative writing. I started querying my senior year of college, which was 10 years ago. And I queried several books over the years. In 2022, I started an MFA program in writing for children and young adults, and then wrote a book that I was really proud of and was like, I'm not waiting to graduate. I'm just going to yeet this into the query trenches. Let's go. And I got an agent that year and have been on sub with a book that unfortunately didn't sell yet. Who knows? I'm, never say never. And now I have worked on a new book in a new age category. I've moved into writing for adults as well as for children. And I have that book with my agent right now. So I'm hoping we can send it out on sub again soon.
That's so exciting. Well, good luck with that.
Thank you.
How do you think your MFA prepared you for an actual career in writing? So beyond that craft, which we'll touch on a little bit later, how did it prepare you for querying, for branding yourself, marketing, all of that?
The thing about specifically the MFA program that I did was they were very focused on you need to spend this time learning the craft. When you check out of the hospital and they're like, it's against medical advice. I went against advisor advice because they were like, no, you should definitely not query well in the program. And I was like, yeah, but I'm impatient. So I don't know what you want me to do. By the time I did start the MFA, I had already been sort of in the publishing online world for 8 years. I had done a lot of research into querying, into agents. I was on Twitter, on Instagram, and so I came into the program knowing a lot about the business and the marketing and querying and everything. So I wouldn't say that my specific MFA program did a lot to prepare me for the business of writing, which maybe they could have done more. But yeah, it was very much this is your bubble of not having to worry about the business of it. And I was like, well, I can't turn it off. I'm, 30 and I've been trying to get published since I was 12. That ship has sailed.
And that's what I've heard from other graduates from MFA programs as well, that it's very writing focused and not necessarily focused on the business of being a writer, which makes sense. It's, it's an arts degree. So
yeah.
But at the same time, I think it would probably benefit to have some courses on how to market yourself and just the life of writing for money.
There's so much about marketing, big bad word, scary term. Nobody wants to write to market. And I understand that and I agree. But there is a lot to be said about when you start a project. you do have to consider, like, I'm gonna put 1 to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years into this project. I should be thinking a little bit about the market, and so that I know that, it's a book that has a possible life. I mean, it's very much a craft topic, like, marketing ties into craft very easily, very organically, and that's not necessarily something that is often thought of, especially given how much publishing has changed over the past 5 years. I think there's so many writers and the market is so tight that you really have to be thoughtful about what and how you write if you actually want a successful career.
For sure. I actually got my agent with my second manuscript because
Nice.
I learned the
Mhm.
industry. My first manuscript, so it was a fey romantasy, which, I thought, look, there are so many of them out there. This must be what sells. No, there are so many of them out there. That's the problem. So, I didn't know much about the industry. I didn't really know what would actually get me an agent and what then would succeed in publishing. And so it's really important to learn that as well. But I mean, so we've touched a bit on how an MFA maybe doesn't necessarily prepare you, but what do you think is a lesson that did serve you well from your MFA?
In terms of craft, you mean?
Yes.
Or
Or
okay.
anything really, craft, the business of being a
Yeah.
writer, anything, your community, even connections that you made.
Yeah, I went into the MFA with like a three-pronged desire. I was like, okay, they cannot guarantee publication. So I'm not even going to go into it and be like, I want an agent out of this. But I was like, I want to find more community. Like, I really want to invest in specifically the Kidlit community and it broadened my horizons. I really wanted to level up my craft, and I had been at that point, it had been 8 years since I'd been in a workshop or, like, worked with a writing teacher in any sense, and so I really felt like I was plateauing as a writer, and it was frustrating me. And I wanted to be able to potentially teach at a graduate or undergraduate level, which unfortunately hasn't happened yet, but the other 2 did happen. I really loved the community in my program. It was one of the best things about the school is just the the way they foster community. It was a low residency program, so we would do most of our work virtually from home, and then 5 times over the course of 2 years, we met for 10-day residencies, and those were just, like, bursts of, like, creativity and community, and I would go away feeling so inspired, and at that time, I w was feeling very low about myself, both as a writer and a person. And I feel like I went to the Vermont College of Fine Arts and the VCFA, WCYA community really like poured into me. And I would leave the residencies and be like, wow, maybe I do have a purpose or there's a reason I exist. Like people seem to enjoy me and that really helped me. And then craft wise, I had my first semester. I was so lucky. I got to work with Jasmine Warga, who's like a incredible author of middle grade and YA. She wrote the verse novel Other Words for Home, which is just stunning. And one concrete piece of advice she told me was I was writing a dual POV romance. Each character was in first person. And she was like, you can really differentiate your characters with their vocabulary, right? Like, she was like, Cammy is not going to say that Nat giggles because Cammy's not a giggle person. Nat is a giggle person. Cammy's not. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. Like, and that seems so small, but it really opened like the floodgates in terms of every little decision matters. And you can really think like the word choice, the where you set them, like there's a big difference in setting a book in New York City versus small town Vermont. Like the people are going to be different, everything is going to be different. So that was a really crucial piece of information that helped a lot.
That's really interesting. So it sounds like you really benefited from the people that you met in this program.
Yes.
Now, not all of us can afford an MFA or can take the time to invest in it. So, what would you say to somebody that wants to build community and make those connections, but can't necessarily invest in an MFA right now?
Absolutely. There's a lot of ways. I know social media, evil, bad. Corporations, no. Like Meta, bad, bad, bad. However, there is a really strong community of writers on Threads. especially in romance. I know the SFF community is really pretty big on Blue Sky. Instagram seems to catch a lot of writers. There are ways, and then the best communities that I found have been sort of branching off of that in Discords. In fact, I think the way we met is through a Discord that I found by being in another Discord and being like, I want to join some romance Discords. Social media can actually be really helpful in terms of you follow authors, you can chat with them, you can even DM them, and you can shoot your shot, I guess. And it doesn't have to be like, I'm not saying to find like the #1 New York Times bestseller and be like, hey, be my bestie. You can do that. It just might not work. But if there are other authors you're following, you see aspiring authors, you see someone posting their agent's guide to their book or their editor's guide to their book, and you really like it and you like their vibes, you can like it, you can comment, you can DM. One thing that I like to tell authors is like, have the audacity in good ways, right? Like in moderation. Reach out to that author you admire. Reach out to the booktuber you like. Apply for the mentorship program that you've seen, because that's another great way to make community. Is I'm a roundtable mentor, and that's a really cool community for specifically unagented authors to find not just a mentor, but a community of fellow writers, both with the mentors and the mentees. I know there's Smooch Pit, which is specifically for romance. There's Roundtable Mentor, which is pretty genre agnostic. Yes.
Yeah, there are a lot of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and those are great ways to find community. The thing about writing that I love is that you can do it with a very low overhead cost, right? If you have a laptop already for your job, perfect. Google Docs, you're good. If your laptop breaks, you can get notebook and pen. You can still be writing. You can find people. I like to go to book events to find people. Sometimes you have to pay for the book ahead of time. Sometimes you just have to RSVP and show up. And then you're sitting next to someone else who's there alone, and you just kind of like lean over and you're like, hey, how's it going? But
Yeah.
not creepy.
Yeah, no, it's funny you mentioned that. Actually, just this morning, I sent an email to the Roundtable Mentorship Program and said I'd love to get
Nice.
involved as a mentor because I love what they're doing. It's just the way that they're reaching out to diverse
Mhm.
authors. I think that's so important.
Yeah. I feel really honored and lucky that I applied last year and was chosen to be a mentor. Like it feels like a really lovely community to be a part of, and especially like a very intentional community. I think intentionality like is never a bad thing. And even if that intentionality is like we intentionally want to make sure that 50% of our mentees and mentors are BIPOC or marginalized or something, like perfect. Like that's just you saying that you recognize that there is a gap and you're being intentional about filling it.
Exactly. That's the
Yeah.
problem. The problem is the lack of representation. It's not, a preference given. It's just leveling the playing field.
Leveling the playing field.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And to your point, like MFAs can be disgustingly expensive, especially low residency ones, which if you're in Kidlit, they tend to be expensive. If you're doing like a fiction or poetry or nonfiction, you can get a full tuition, free ride essentially. I was in a bad place mentally when I applied to my MFA and basically was like, whatever, I already have a lot of debt. Let's just add 30,000 to it. Like, what's it gonna matter? And I'm paying the price now.
Mhm.
Um, and I do think I got a lot out of it, but I also know that it did, come around a little bit to bite me in the butt. So if an MFA is not something that someone wants and it's not something that they can afford and it's not in the cards, you can find other ways. You can find a mentor. If you have $5 a month, you can join an author Patreon. You can listen to podcasts like this podcast. I have a craft podcast. There's Turning to Story, which is with Anna Mercier and Lisa Mia Smith, which is an excellent craft podcast.
Mhm.
But even non-craft focused podcasts, like they talk about the craft of writing just organically. And I learned so much about the industry from podcasts like Ride or Die with Clarabelle and Catcho when it was running, or now I really love Of the Publishing Persuasion or Happy to Meet You. Like there's just so many amazing resources out there. And I think authors tend to be, I'm not going to make a blatant statement, but they tend to be very generous with their time and I don't know many writers who are like, "Wow, I just had a breakthrough. Let me keep it to myself."
Exactly.
It's very much like, "I just figured this out. Let me go tell every single writer
Yes.
that I know."
It's so true. So when I started in the writing industry, this was 2 years ago at this point,
Mm.
I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know, craft-wise or business-wise. And so I
Yeah.
vowed, once I figure this out, I am going to do all that I can to help others that are as confused as I am because it was awful. And
Mhm.
I feel like we kind of did the same thing where you try everything, and so I was signing up for courses that were absolutely awful. I was joining webinars where they just wanted to sell me on something that I
Oh.
really didn't need. But, as you go, you have to keep kind of a skeptical eye, and you have to be really careful. But if you just cast a wide net and try everything, don't
Mhm.
spend money on everything, but try
Yes.
everything. That's the only way to learn. That's it. And
Mhm.
actually, I'll add to your list of podcasts. I don't know if you've listened to The Shit No One Tells You About Writing.
Yes.
That one's
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
good. And it's good now. Cece and Carly have a new segment called Shooting the Shit, where they talk more about like industry side. So it's very interesting.
That's very
Yeah.
needed, yeah.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's also, like, it's hard to find centralized sources of information for publishing. I put together in December a master doc where I just, like, compiled every resource that I have.
Oh,
It's
fantastic.
just in a Google Doc that people can access because I was like, I have spent, like, 12 years learning about publishing and just kinda, like, compiling information from various sources, like, I'm, chronically online because what else am I gonna do but read Threads drama? So I have gained a lot of information, and it's like a living document that I like add to and stuff. But it's my way of trying to be like, it is very hard to figure out publishing. If you come in and you
Yeah.
know nothing, and every day you see people on Reddit or on Threads be like, wait, what's the difference between indie and trad pub? And as someone who's done it for a while, you're like, oh my God, how do you not know this? But why would someone know that if they
Yeah.
weren't already in the publishing industry in some
Yeah.
way?
And you think coming into writing that the main thing you need to know is how to write. And there's also, if you've never had any formal training in writing, there's a
Mhm.
lot to learn. The learning curve is really steep. I remember one of the first things I did was I joined a small writing group. And
Nice.
yeah, basically it was a critique group where we would just read our excerpts for 10 minutes and then
Mhm.
people would just give feedback, which was really great. But, I'm getting feedback like, you're using was a lot. This is very passive. Your
Mm.
every single sentence in this paragraph starts with I. Things like that. So very basic things, but now I think they're basic. Back then, I was just grabbing every little tidbit I could get and thinking, "Oh my god, I need to learn so much."
And especially if you come from, like, academics or law, medicine, science, like, you know how to write, but you don't necessarily know how to creative write because
Exactly.
it's different.
Exactly. 100%. Well, let's talk a little bit about craft then.
Mhm. Yes.
Let's talk about craft books. Let's start with that. What do you think the pros and cons are of learning from craft books?
Yeah, I mean, the pros, there are some really great ones that offer concrete, actionable advice. I just read Romancing the Beat by Gwen Hayes, which is a 2016. It's like 94 pages. And it's one of those that's very concrete. Here are the beats, here's how to write it. And then it kind of ends and it's like, but also put your own magic to it, like put your own spin on it. And the by beats, I mean things like story turns or like key moments in a story where when I started writing, I was doing it very instinctually. And so I didn't know that there were acts. I was like, what? No, I'm just like writing a story and I'm pantsing it and it's happening. And people were
Yeah.
like, but it doesn't quite read like a book. And so this book has been really helpful in terms of making sure that my romance that I've written has all those beats and is hitting those moments because consciously or subconsciously, that's what readers are also looking for.
Right.
But I think a con of craft books is they can fall into prescriptive territory.
Uh-huh.
So you want to, as you're reading it, kind of like, what is the tone the author is taking? Are they taking a tone of, your mileage may vary, like this, take what you will out of this. This is what worked for me. Or are they taking a tone of when you're writing a book, you must begin with a dream, or you must never begin with a dream? And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, fair, but sometimes sometimes you can.
Yeah.
And I think the best craft books are the ones that, like, sit down and they're like, "Listen, I've written 12 books, but I'm not an expert because who is?"
Right.
Like, this is one of those crafts and industries and arts that you cannot actually ever like, you can master and write one perfect book, not really, but, like, as perfect as possible, and your next book could come out, like, awful,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
It's ups and downs, a learning curve. It's very
Yeah.
much like life and, like, a mental health journey.
Oh, yeah.
I'm
For
like,
sure. For
you're,
sure.
like, backsliding and moving forward and ups and downs, and it's just the sooner as aspiring writers and I need to hear this today, like, the sooner you can be like, there will be hills and there will be valleys and there will be dry spells and there will be moments where you're like, "Could it stop raining for 1 second?" Like,
Yeah.
the happier we will all be.
That's very true. And I think it's also so important to remember why you started writing. You wanted, as a 12-year-old, to beat this 11-year-old, and you did it. You did it. You accomplished your goal. I started writing because I was having also a really, really hard time with my mental health,
Mhm.
and I wanted to explore that.
Yeah.
So we've accomplished our goals, and then you kind of lose focus and you think about the numbers and the
Mhm.
publishing and the success and all of that. And at the end of the day, I think that those of us that are most successful do it because we love writing.
Mhm.
And we built
Mhm.
a career on something we love. Like how
Yeah.
much better can it get? That's
Right.
insane.
It's both really good and really awful.
Yeah.
But it's a privilege and it's an honor to be able to tell stories and to have people listen.
For sure.
And one thing that I'm sort of grappling with in my own craft these days, and this is so basic, you'd think I would have already learned this, but like I said, backslides and stuff. And it's the idea of it's kind of hitting me again that nobody owes me their time and
Yeah.
attention and like listening or reading my story. So I really have to make it worth their while and I have to show them why it's going to be a good story. I have to hook them. I have to, give them a reason to care.
Yeah.
I don't have to do that. I could just write like whatever I want and then the people who love me will read it, but no one who doesn't know me and love me is going to care unless I'm giving the reader something.
For sure. For sure, yeah. Well, actually, so before we move on, you had mentioned
Mhm.
romancing the beat. So I
Yeah.
just wanted to go back and if you could give a quick list of some craft books you found really helpful. I can talk about some of my favorites too, but let's start with you.
Yeah. I have recently also read Charlie Jane Anders's Never Say You Can't Survive, which is a craft book slash like manual like of essays for surviving terrible times. Charlie started writing it and essays for Tor.com, I believe, in 2020. And it was, we all thought that it was the end of the world in 2020. Thinking back on early 2020 now, it's very shocking because we're 5 years on and somehow the earth is still turning. But I genuinely was like, this is the end.
Yep.
And so these are essays that are like, there's a pandemic, there's riots, we're having like a racial reckoning in the US and it just feel like the world has felt like it's been ending for like 5 years or longer and it's really hard to keep creating in that time and I found this book of essays to be really helpful in terms of like it reminds you why you're writing, right? Like
Yeah.
okay, no one's forcing you to write. So if it doesn't feel good, you don't have to. But if it does feel good
Yeah.
and if it brings you joy and it helps your mental health and it like provides an escape or provides an outlet for your rage, both of those are so valid. Whether you need to like forget about the bad thing or be like, you know what? I need to stab some people, so I'm gonna do it in fiction.
Oh, yeah.
But it's also got like really excellent craft tips, which I thought it was just gonna be a motivational essays, but they're like really actionable. Um, Tips. And then some books that I'm really excited to read on craft that I haven't quite gotten to yet. One of them is Craft in the Real World by Matthew Salesses, and one of them is The Anti-Racist Workshop. And they're two that I'm really excited for because they talk a lot about not just craft, like not craft in a vacuum, but how to write and how to specifically for the Anti-Racist Workshop, like how to engage with others writing in a way that is divested from white supremacy. And so I've learned this from like friends that I met at VCFA who are Swana or who are Native American or who are Black. Like, I'm a white woman and I'm going through the world, and there are doors that open for me that I didn't even realize were closed to other people. And my friends have been so gracious. Sometimes it's just a matter of them being like, this really awful thing happened. And I'm like, I didn't know that was a thing that would happen. And so I've learned a lot about things like the anti-racist writing workshop. Like, we had a lot of conversations in my MFA about how workshops are run, because there are some models, like the traditional workshop model is, I present my work and then I shut up and my colleagues talk about it for 45 minutes and they talk about whatever they want. And that might be nothing that I need, right? Like, I may come in with a distinct goal for my piece where I'm like, I want to figure out the pacing. And then they spend 10 minutes talking about whether it's a pack and play or like a baby crib, right? Like, that actually happened in a workshop. And the workshopee was sitting there like, this doesn't help me. And like the people just kept going on like, no, I think it's a pack and let me Google. Like, oh my God. Like, and it's like, okay, that's the traditional workshop model where you sit down and you shut up, but that doesn't serve everyone.
Right.
And so there are other workshop models where it's like, you come in and you say, hey, here's my piece. Here are 3 questions that I have. It's a conversation. If someone starts to go off on a tangent and be like, yeah, I don't really like the way you wrote this dialogue, I can be like, actually, I did that on purpose and I'm fine with it. Can we talk about the pacing?
Yeah. Yeah.
So to try and circle back to making a point here, so much of traditional craft advice is very Western and very white American.
Mhm.
And so much of storytelling is cultural. And there is so much beauty in opening your eyes and seeing how other people tell stories and learning not just their experience, but their like the very foundational fabric of their stories. I have a friend who's writing a lovely book, and the way it starts is like a way that a lot of people that she's encountered have been like, well, this isn't how you start a book. This is like you're telling, or you're doing this, or you're doing that. And she's like, well, this is actually like where I come from. Like, this is how we tell our stories. And I'm not to say that she's not doing the craft work of still making it suck you in, but there are so many times when we just have a gut reaction, an
Right.
instinct to be like, well, that's not how I do it.
Yeah.
And a lot of what I've learned about craft lately is like, okay, so that's not how I would do it. But is it working? Do I think that like it's working for what the author's intent was?
Right.
Like maybe
Yeah.
they didn't want me to cry at this scene. Maybe they wanted me to rage, and I'm raging. Therefore, it's working.
Yeah. No, I feel the same way. I mean, I had this one earlier iteration of the manuscript that I'm currently working on where it started with a quote, somebody talking.
Mhm.
And I got advice from someone that you never start a book with a quote or a chapter with a
Mhm.
quote. And that just seemed so strange to me because I thought, this is great. This is a captivating quote. It was someone saying, I hear her competitors set her on fire. That was the first quote of my novel.
I want
So,
to know more.
right, it's doing its job. Don't start with a quote, but I mean, it works. It's a compelling first sentence. So,
Mhm.
we've since changed it for other reasons because I've changed my entire beginning. So, it doesn't make sense anymore, but I still use that quote, just not as the first quote.
Yeah.
But, it's funny that you mentioned that some craft books just don't allow for broader experiences.
Mhm.
So there's one craft book specifically that I'm thinking of, and it's written by a very, very successful, very well-known writer. And I want to get your opinion on something that's written in it because
Mhm.
I read over it several times and eventually I just said, I just need to ignore this. So this book says that if you work really hard and you put the time in, then a mediocre writer can be good. But no matter how much time you put in and effort, a good writer can never be great. Greatness is something you just have to be born with. You can't improve your writing to be great.
I'm having some feelings.
I had very strong feelings.
It's no, I don't like it. And I don't like it in part because I recognize my own beliefs in that about myself, where it's like, well, if I wasn't born talented enough, I'll just never achieve it. And it's like, no.
Mhm.
Especially in writing, you can develop taste. You can develop an eye for detail. All of
Mhm.
those things that, like, to some people, all of the things that make great writing, quote unquote, great, to some people can come naturally, but they can also be cultivated. And
Yeah.
what I love in a book is, like, I love a poetic turn of phrase. I love a good metaphor. I love, like a romance that organizes,
Yeah.
right? That you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I want you to, it's so bad, but so good. And all of this can be taught. And
Yeah.
even if it's like, well, yeah, but the poetry is just this in how you view the world. I'm like, okay. So start paying attention, make a practice of it. Like, and I've noticed I started out writing poetry when I was in high school and then sort of transitioned into prose and fiction. And I haven't written poetry in a long time, but I noticed that when I start writing poetry, the way I view the world changes. And then that affects my prose because it's like I'm paying attention more and I'm observing more. There's more
Right.
vibrancy, there's more color, there's more life to my settings. And
Right.
that takes a piece of writing from good to great. Oh man, I'm angry.
Well, I mean, and the big thing for me too is writing is so subjective. We even see that while we're querying, some agents will immediately say, yes, I want this, I want to see more. And the exact same book, others will say, nope, not interested, pass within 2 hours of submitting.
And
Ooh.
same with submission. I got so, this is not necessarily about craft, but I got two editor passes on my book. One was like, this setting won't work for us. And the other was like, wow, who doesn't love this setting? And I was like, well, the other editor did it.
In this industry, I think you can say technically what, we've seen
Mhm.
works. You can say what you enjoy, but I don't think you can objectively say what is greatness or not.
And even on a technical level, there's things where I'm like, okay, I can say I personally am a stickler for grammar and punctuation, especially. But also, there is no such thing as correct grammar. I mean, there is, but it's like I'm thinking specifically of dialects, but
Mhm.
also AAVE, which doesn't sound like standard. I can't remember what. I think it's like standard American English or something, but AAVE, which is African American Vernacular English, has different sometimes sentence structures
Yeah.
and uses of verbs and stuff. And you can't look at that and be like, well, that's bad writing. It's not. It's just different from
Yeah.
what you were taught and trained to believe is right, which
Yeah.
circling back to my earlier point, you were taught and trained that it was right because it's like what white people did. It's perfect in its own way. I don't believe necessarily for other people. Obviously, for me, it's like if you're not doing it right, you're wrong. But that's my own issue that I talk to about in therapy. But I believe that you can achieve pretty much anything you want. You can achieve greatness in whatever field you want. You have to practice at it. Like, I used to play the piano. I wasn't very good at it, but if I had continued practicing, it could have become something that I was great at. And it maybe wouldn't have been, I wasn't a prodigy, but so what? Like, 1% of people are prodigies. That doesn't mean that
Yeah.
they're the only ones who are great.
Right. Yeah. Well, so shifting back to kind of writing rules,
Yeah.
I'm wondering, since I know you edit, you have an MFA, so you clearly have the technical background. So, what is one writing rule that you really try to stick by? And then what's one that
Mm.
you will gladly break?
Ooh, great question. Making me think.
Take your
A
time.
writing, I'm gonna think of the one that I will gladly break first. Well, it's more like a writing stigma, which is I think some incredible literary works are coming out of Kidlit, whether that's picture books, middle grade, chapter books, YA. And it's not a rule that it doesn't, but it seems to be an idea in a lot of publishing spaces
Mhm.
that it's not as good. And I
It's
I mean,
true.
like, I watch a lot of BookTube, and there will be booktubers whom I really enjoy watching, and they'll say something like, "Oh, this is only gonna be a 4-star because, like, it's a YA, so it's not that good." And I'm like, "Yeah, but you are literally crying as you say this
Yeah.
because the book moved you so much."
Yeah. I was listening to somebody give a talk on writing actually, and
Mhm.
they said, well, this reads YA. And I asked, what does that mean? What does reads YA mean? And they had to think about it for a bit, but they said, it's just less sophisticated. It's less well written. And I'm like,
Oh,
mm.
I mean, okay, go tell that to Jason Reynolds or Elizabeth Acevedo that their work isn't, like, well written. Come on.
Yeah. So I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
But then what's
But
one rule that you're a stickler
yeah.
for?
What am I a stickler for? Honestly, unfortunately, it's grammar rules. I love a comma, and I need it to be in the right place in the sentence. And part of that is because I really internalized as a youth the idea that commas indicate a pause or like things, parts of a list. So to me, I come across a comma and I stop. Not stop, but like I'll take a breather. And if it comes in the middle of a sentence or like a clause where you don't need to take a breather, it throws me off.
Right.
So I'm a big comma freak.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of rules are like, yeah, I agree with this like 90% of the time, right? Like, it's usually better to show than to tell, but however, sometimes you just gotta tell, and
Oh,
that's how
yeah.
it's gonna be, you know?
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine an entire book of just paragraphs about somebody, how they walk and
Right,
why
like
they're looking to the side?
instead of saying like I walked across the street, be like I picked up one foot and put it down, and then the other foot moved, and you're like, oh my God, who cares? Just
Right?
say I walked across the street.
Exactly. Sometimes you just need to tell. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
That is one sentiment that I will stick to.
100%. Yeah.
How about writing exercises? Are there any that you found
Mhm.
really helpful?
Yeah, I love a good like side writing, like journaling practice. And I will caveat this with I don't necessarily do them all the time because I'm really impatient and I just want to like write the book to my own detriment sometimes. So I'll give two writing exercises. The first one is like a journal, right? Like if you're trying to get to know a side character, a love interest, even the main character, and you're just not sure how they would handle something, sit down, open a random piece of paper or document, and just write like, it's Monday, October 5th, and I went for a run and I did this. And as you write and you attempt to capture that character's voice, you will start to learn things. And it might be, oh my God, I didn't know that this character like hates the color yellow, like with a passion. And that's going to come in the book at some point. They're just going to be like, why are you wearing a yellow dress? Like, I hate it. And, the main character is like, oh, my love interest hates me. And the love interest is like, I just hate the color yellow. That's why I'm frowning.
That's very funny.
Terrible example.
No, I'm laughing so hard because my main character in my book right now says the literal sentence, yellow is my most loathed color.
Oh my God. That's funny. Oh my God.
Yeah, I don't know how you came up with that, but
I got some kind of like brain synchronicity.
yeah.
The other exercise that I love is just a free write. I a couple weeks ago was just feeling this like overload of creative energy that I didn't know where to put. And so I just opened up and I have my notes app for like fake writing, right? Like it's not serious. It doesn't need to go anywhere. If I open a Google Doc, I'm going to be like intense about it. So I opened my notes and I just started writing and I found this voice. And next thing I knew, I was 2 pages in and I came up with a whole novel for it. And it's a type of story I've never written before. And there might be structural techniques that I've never used before. And it all came because I was writing and someone was wearing a hoodie. And I just like followed that train. And next thing I knew, I was like, oh, it's just like toxic lesbians having their childhood till adulthood, like epic love story.
I love that.
And I'm really excited for that project.
That sounds incredible. Now, I do want to ask before we sign off, how is Kidlit different than adult? And not in that it's less sophisticated, but just what different skills do you need to write it?
Yeah, definitely in terms of like a prose or a voice approach, you need to be able to, especially if you're writing in first person, your prose needs to read like an actual teenager. So some teenagers are walking around using SAT words fluently. Some teenagers are throwing out SAT words as a joke. I saw that in Amelia, If Only by Becky Albertalli, where they just like throw out these massive words and they'll be like SAT word, and it's like a thing. You don't see that, you capture the voice, and that's why a lot of times people will say like, why are you writing is cringy? And I'm like, okay, well, I was so cringy as a teenager,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like I was 16, I was overly dramatic. Every time my crush made eye contact with me, I planned our wedding.
That's
That's
relatable,
realistic.
though. That's very
Yeah.
realistic.
So that's on like a pro style. Like you have to, I guess, like you have to be willing to take the hits of the people who look down on, especially if you're writing teen girls.
Mhm.
You just have to know that there's going to be people who are going to hate it because people hate teen girls.
Mhm.
You know, they hate
Yep.
what teen girls love. They hate how teen girls talk, even though another topic for another day. It's like the power of teen girls and the culture. But you there's a lot, like, commitment to the bit, I think, is really important in Kidlit. The bit being the voice or
Right.
the prose or the 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 funny, quirky parts of your story.
Right.
The biggest difference I noticed in moving into an adult romance from my YA romances was I could up the intensity.
Mm.
In the sense of, I had this project that started as 2 girls who both kinda got, like, screwed over by a boy, and they came together to get revenge, and then they fell in love with each other. And as a YA, which is was originally supposed to be, was he hurt their feelings, and so they came together and they, I don't know, exposed him. Which is great. As an adult, I was like, well, what if instead of that, he outed one girl, or he tried to, he got the other fired, and then the consequences are far more intense? Because one thing that I firmly believe Kidlit needs is it needs at least like a 51% hopeful ending.
Mm.
It can be bittersweet. It doesn't have to be everything tied up with a bow and we're happy, but it needs to be more on the hope than on the despair.
Right.
And I think that's because Kidlit has a responsibility to its readers. All authors have a responsibility to their readers. Kidlit authors need to be aware that their readers, their primary readers, the audience that the books are meant for, and this is a hill I will die on, is that if you're writing Kidlit and your goal and your first audience isn't like kids, just write something else. But we all know kids' brains aren't fully formed, like their frontal cortex or whatever it's called, their frontal lobe.
Yeah.
There we go. As a 32-year-old, I would never say something to a teenager that I might be able to say to my 32-year-old friends.
Yeah.
Because they're different and like they don't have the same rights that I do, like they don't have the same agency that I do. There's different power dynamics. And you just have to be aware of that when you're writing Kidlit. Like,
Yeah.
you're not talking down to them. You're not condescending. You're not coming at it from a place of like, I'm better than you. You're coming at it from a place of, I recognize that the society and the world has put me here at this level and it's put you here at this level. And there's a power imbalance. And I am going to hold that in my head and I'm going to write with care. And I'm going to make sure that I don't harm you. Because it really, really, really can do a lot of harm.
Yeah.
And I think, like, as an adult, I can read homophobic statements on Facebook, which aren't books, but just, like, it's something, like, someone can put that out, and it can really hurt me, but it's not necessarily going to destroy me. Whereas if I were 16 and I read, someone saying, like, oh, Karis is so ugly, like, I would still be dealing with that today.
For sure. For sure. I still remember
Actually, I
things
am
that
still dealing.
Yeah, no, I still remember things that kids said to me when I was in elementary school. Their comments that really stuck with me. And
Yeah.
I love that though. Our responsibility to kids. It's shivers.
Yeah. I think Kidlit is really special. I think it's really incredible. Like, I think there's incredible works of literature in YA, in middle grade. Like, they're just amazing. And then there are books that are, like, fun. And then there are books that are sad. And then there are books that are, like, mediocre. And you know what? So literary fiction can be mediocre and it's still going to win awards. Yeah.
Wow. That was so insightful. Thank you so much, Karis, for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
And thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and remember to check back next Tuesday for a new episode of the Prose Pros podcast.